Tracy Sable tonight on Ewtn News Nightly. North Korean missile. A new launch threatens Japan. How world leaders are responding. Chemical abortions. Did the government illegally approve drugs harmful to teen girls and women? Learn more about a new lawsuit. The Synodal Way. Pope Francis holds a dialogue with bishops from Germany. We have a report from Rome. And a new blessing. Bishop Robert Barron reconsecrates a cemetery vandalized on Halloween. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us. Our top story tonight, Attorney General Merrick Garland has named a special counsel for probes into former President Donald Trump. The investigations focus on the riot at the Capitol on January 6th and the presence of classified documents at the former president's Florida estate. The move comes just days after the 45th president announced that he is running again for president in 2024. Meantime, the White House condemns North Korea's latest missile launch. The high-powered rocket went down near Japan, but reportedly has the capability of reaching anywhere in the U.S. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. North Korea's provocative action is considered a threat to national security, not just here in America, but for countries across the globe.
World leaders hold emergency talks in Thailand. They were already gathered for the APEC summit, but quickly turned their attention to North Korea and that country's ballistic missile launch.
Together, the countries represented here will continue to urge North Korea to commit to serious and sustained diplomacy.
Vice President Kamala Harris says the U.S. stands with Indo-Pacific countries against North Korea's test.
I've also asked them to join so that we as allies and partners can consult on next steps.
The U.S. National Security Council also responding in a statement saying this launch is a brazen violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions and needlessly raises tensions and risks destabilizing the security situation in the region. The White House says the door has not closed on diplomacy, but it insists North Korea stop making threats. Domestic policy is also making headlines today. President Joe Biden brought together the U.S. Treasury Secretary and business leaders to discuss the economy.
I look forward to continuing to partner with them and hearing their thoughts about things I should do and should not do, ways we can continue to strengthen the American economy, and about how we can work together going forward.
The president is looking for ideas to bring inflation down. He believes new provisions from the Inflation Reduction Act will help when they take effect January 1st, including price caps on some medicine and cheaper health insurance for people covered by the Affordable Care Act.
People are going to get a little more breathing room come January 1st.
Also tonight, the race for the White House in 2024 comes to Las Vegas this weekend. It's the Republican Jewish Coalition's annual leadership meeting. Former Vice President Mike Pence and Republican Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida will each be speaking at the event. And former President Donald Trump, who just announced he's running a few days ago, will also be speaking, but by video conference. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, there are only a few weeks left in this session of Congress before lawmakers head home for the holidays. But before they do, Congress has to clear several must-pass items, including a defense funding bill, another to keep the government open, and decide what to do about the debt ceiling. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales runs it all down for us.
The clock is ticking during this lame duck session of Congress. Democrats would like to get as much done before Republicans take over the U.S. House in January. Senate Republicans tell me key bills should not be coming down to the wire.
For the last year now, we've been doing elective things rather than required courses. We've still got appropriations we have to address, the debt limit that we've got, the National Defense Authorization Act, all critical items, all coming down to the last few weeks.
Topping the list is the National Defense Authorization Act, which authorizes funding for defense. It's been passed by Congress for 61 consecutive years, but not usually during a lame duck session. Senator John Kennedy tells me it's not a good way to do business.
Well, the NDAA is important. When you do a continuing resolution, it's impossible for our military to plan. And that's also another reason why the budget's important. Will we get it done by the end of the year? I don't know.
Senator Kennedy adds national security is also at risk, along with military pay and troop strength. Other Republicans tell me they oppose the bill.
We got a lot of problems with the NDAA. I mean, currently, from my point of view, it includes a provision for compulsory draft for women, which I'm against, compulsory service. I think women should be able to serve if they want to.
Senator Hawley says he also opposes allowing the Defense Department to discharge soldiers who have not had a COVID vaccine. Democrats may try to attach more Ukraine aid to the bill. President Biden is asking Congress for another $38 billion. Senator Chris Murphy tells me more money may be a tough sell.
I think the president is worried about the ability to move Ukraine money next year once Republicans take control of the House, and it's a smart move to try to make sure that we get them what they need right now so that we don't have to be fighting with the Republican Party over Ukraine next year.
Along with more Ukraine aid, President Biden also wants billions more in new COVID money.
Lawmakers need to keep the government funded. Money is set to run out next month. The Senate will also take up votes on the same-sex marriage bill when they return from the Thanksgiving break. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Internationally, the United Nations welcomes renewal of an agreement to continue grain exports from Ukraine.
It is very good news for the world.
At the same time, a UN official warns about fertilizer shortages. Yesterday, Russia, Turkey, and Ukraine extended a 4-month deal to continue the export of food supplies through the Black Sea. Obstacles still remain for a corresponding pact for goods from Russia. A church leader in Germany is calling for a closer look at the situation for Christians in Qatar, the country hosting the World Cup. Bishop Stefan Oster says many migrant workers in Qatar are Christian and they are granted religious freedom, quote, only to a certain extent. He also says major sporting events usually do not improve social conditions. The 32-team World Cup in the majority Muslim nation begins tomorrow. The Holy Father held a nearly 2-hour meeting yesterday with members of the German Bishops' Conference. In a statement, the German bishops said the meeting was, quote, an open round of talks, and the church leaders were able to raise their questions and issues, and the Pope answered them individually. Joining us now from Rome is Rudolf Gehring, EWTN Vatican journalist and Rome correspondent for CNA Deutsch. Rudolf, great to see you again. We know the German bishops met with the Holy Father. What more do we know about that meeting? And also, what else was on the agenda for them in Rome?
Yeah, the 67 members of the German Bishops' Conference came to Rome to present reports on the dioceses, have a meeting with the Pope, and speak with representatives of Holy See officers. Expectations were very high in the run-up to the meeting, not only because of the so-called synodal way in Germany. Many feared that the Church in Germany might split off the Universal Church. So, in addition to many structural and pastoral questions, it was again about a possible schism.
And amid the concerns over the synodal way, what has Pope Francis said about the Church in Germany?
Yeah, in the past, Pope Francis has repeatedly admonished the Church there not to lose sight of Christ. He wrote a letter, and on his return flight from Bahrain, he even said, half jokingly, half seriously, that he does not want a second Protestant church in Germany. A clear warning signal to the German bishops. The bishops had a 2-hour audience with the Pope Francis yesterday, and among other things, they talked about the role of the lay people and, of course, the synodal way in Germany. The German Bishops' Conference has published a brief statement on the matter, but there's no official statement from the Holy See so far. However, we have learned from a reliable source that some bishops try to promote the agenda of the synodal way with Pope Francis. For example, they asked the Holy Father to ordain so-called viri probati as priests in the future. That would be a break with church teaching.
And Rudolf, what's next for the German Bishops' Conference, not only for the synodal way in Germany, but also for the worldwide Synod of Synodality?
Here in Rome, many have seen for the first time with their own eyes how divided the German Bishops' Conference really is. I know that at the official meeting, some important members of the Roman Curia admonished their guests from Germany in a fraternal but nonetheless emphatic manner. There is much at stake, nothing less than the unity of the Church. And at least with some bishops, this message has been received. It is hoped that instead of a schism, the focus becomes now on what the Pope really desires, synodality.
Rudolf, thank you so much for this report. We appreciate it. Rudolf Gehrig, EWTN Vatican journalist and Rome correspondent for CNA Deutsch. Thank you again. And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including the FDA and abortion pills. A new lawsuit claims the government agency illegally approved harmful drugs, and remembering a beloved Capuchin friar on the anniversary of his beatification. Thanks for staying with us. There is upsetting news for the first Catholic archdiocese in the United States from an investigation into sexual abuse cases. Maryland's Attorney General identifies more than 150 Catholic priests and religious accused in the Archdiocese of Baltimore over 8 decades. In reaction, Archbishop William Lori expressed renewed shame, remorse, and sympathy for more than 600 victims. A group of doctors says the FDA illegally approved certain chemical abortion drugs for women and teenage girls at a cost to their safety and health. In a lawsuit filed last night, the doctors say the FDA put politics over science when they approved chemical abortion drugs, mifepristone and misoprostol, ignoring evidence that the drugs cause more complications than surgical abortions. And with us tonight is Julie Marie Blake, Senior Counsel for the Alliance Defending Freedom. Julie, welcome. Good to be with you. Talk to us more about these drugs and just how dangerous they are.
Well, the FDA has a responsibility to protect the health and safety of all Americans, but it has failed to protect women and girls from the harms of dangerous chemical abortion drugs. These drugs are dangerous and they should never have been approved. Our new lawsuit asks the FDA to take them off of the market.
Yeah, and it is really so hard to believe that teenage girls can legally access these and take these. Can you tell us how these drugs impact a young girl's development and how it impacts them in other ways?
Well, these drugs are dangerous and harmful, especially for women and girls. The FDA approved these drugs, which are usually used up to 10 weeks of pregnancy, without doing any pediatric studies. That's right, they're used on women and girls, including girls in puberty, without even studying first whether that'll affect the girl's development. So abortion always takes a human life, but they also can create real complications, real needs for medical attention for women and girls. And the FDA hasn't followed the science. Instead, they followed politics. So our lawsuit asks the FDA to put the politics aside, follow the science, and to start protecting these young girls from these incredibly dangerous, life-altering chemical abortion pills.
Yeah, I'm curious, what sort of safety protocols did they skip over, and why do you think they would do that?
Well, they were approved by President Clinton right on his way out of office. And what it was done was not based on the science. It wasn't based on protecting girls. And since then, they've just removed every safeguard that has been in place. Our clients are emergency room doctors, OBs, major medical associations who every day are dealing with the harms from chemical abortion drugs. When you allow mail order abortion drugs, like the FDA has done, you get these dangerous chemical abortion drugs in the mail without ever seeing an abortionist even in person, no ultrasound, no protections. And so when a woman takes these alone at home, these mail order drugs, and sees what happens during the course of her self-administered abortion, often, as many as 1 in 5 seek medical attention afterwards. They go to their ER, they go to their local OB, and we represent those doctors, these patients. We're going to court and asking them to order the FDA to finally start protecting women and girls who should not not have to go through the trauma of taking these chemical abortion drugs.
Yeah, and in other related news, I want to bring this up to you. This week, the New York Post and other news outlets reported that a Texas lawyer allegedly slipped an abortion drug into his wife's drink. I want to get your reaction to this. And do you expect maybe this sort of thing to continue happening?
That is just horrifying to think that when we have mail order abortion, that someone can go online and an abuser, someone who's hostile to women, try and get abortion drugs, in this case apparently illegally because the man couldn't be prescribed them himself, and then slip them in a woman's drink. It's horrible. And so the fewer of these dangerous chemical abortion drugs out there, the better.
Absolutely. Curious, we're almost out of time, but winning this case really could mean a devastating blow to the drug makers and also a big fall from grace for the FDA, really. There's so much at stake here. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, more than half of abortions in America are chemical abortions right now, and chemical abortion is far more dangerous than surgical abortion. Obviously, abortion always takes an innocent life, but women deserve better than these dangerous chemical abortion drugs. They deserve better than the FDA letting them down. And so our lawsuit seeks to stop these harms to women and to finally hold the FDA to account in court.
Well, Julie, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for your time. Keep us posted.
Thank you.
And up next on EWTN News Nightly, crypto questions, what Catholics need to know about digital currency and how to avoid pitfalls. Plus, Bishop Robert Barron prays to purify a vandalized cemetery. It was on this day in 2017 that Father Solanus Casey was beatified at Ford Field in Detroit. The Capuchin friar, who died in 1957, was known as a miracle worker and for his spiritual counseling. One more miracle attributed to Blessed Solanus Casey's intercession is needed to be approved before possible sainthood. Topping the headlines this week, bankruptcy and the financial collapse of cryptocurrency giant FTX. CEO Sam Bankman-Fried used billions of the company's cryptocurrency assets as collateral in loans. As this came to light, investors rushed to sell their FTX holdings. Bankman-Fried was also a top donor to Democratic candidates and causes, second only to George Soros. Meantime, the first ever Catholic crypto conference met this week in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. And joining us now to discuss is conference host and founder of the Genesis Group, Matthew Pinto. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it. Before we delve further, I wanted to ask you a few things, if you could, if you don't mind. Break this down for our audience in layman's terms. What exactly is blockchain and cryptocurrency, and what are the uses for it?
Yeah, great question. Big question. Many people believe that about once every 15 to 20 years, the world, you and me and everyone in it, we experience a technological shift. About 25 plus years ago, we had the internet. About 15 years ago, we had the mobile net, and now this technology called blockchain and cryptocurrency are powerful in themselves, but when they come together, they create a whole host of other things, Tracy. One you and I will come to know as Web 3.0, something called NFTs, non-fungible tokens, this whole world of what's called tokenization. And so these are powerful technologies, but like with anything, they can be used for great good, and at times they can be used for not so good. And it's the story as old as time.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we mentioned, that fallout from FTX, the bankruptcy announcement, that's been pretty far-reaching. What more can you tell us about that? What happened? And is there a way that that could have been avoided?
Yeah, great question. Again, another big question. So it really is a big moment. It's like a number 2 or 3 moment in the 14 or 15 year at most crypto history. And it just happened to happen the week before this conference, which more than a few of us think might be providence, in the sense that we can educate Catholics, which is the purpose of the conference, to really begin to address the question, what is this new technology? But FTX is a collapse of a a centralized entity that people thought they did due diligence on, but they did not. And we don't fully know whether it was a Ponzi. We know it was negligence, it seems, at a minimum. But there's a lot of discussion about was this intentional, a takedown to bring on potentially regulation at a faster speed? The industry does want regulation. It just wants reasonable regulation, as any industry would want reasonable regulation. But this is a big moment, and a big event happened, and we think it was ultimately due to bad players. And strangely, many people in this field believe that this is going to happen in a new industry, and it's kind of good to get these bad players out of the way as soon as possible, so the industry can harden. Like any new technology, it can harden and eventually do the good that it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and I know you say even with this scandal, it's really important for Catholics to know a thing or two about these new technologies. Explain to us why we should stay on top of it, why it's so important.
Yeah. As Catholics, you and I affirm the unbelievable reality of something called the incarnation, God becoming man. And my sense is that when God becomes man, he affirms the created world. In the beginning, you and I know that it was very good. And so anything that is a new creation, really, in a certain sense, is a spark of the divine. Any new idea, any concept, because God himself is a creative God. And so we would say, as Catholics, step one, or reason number one, is we are in the world. These creations, these new technologies are coming our way. And if we're going to be functioning in the world, at a minimum, we need to know what they are. But the bigger point is that Jesus claims every inch of the world as his own. There's not an inch in this world that is not his own. And if we can look at some of these new technologies and claim them for the Lord, look to leverage them for the common good, maybe even for the sake of the gospel, then that's a good thing. One last thing, Tracy, is you and I would want, and any believing Catholic would want, the church to have a seat at every table. Because the church is in the world, it's in our lives. It really is the vehicle that the Lord set up to lead us to him. And so the church needs to have a seat at this table, especially during times where crisis hits. We want to be able to have input on how these things should be governed so they can ultimately serve the common good.
Yeah, that is such a good point. I also wanted to ask you to talk about a little bit more about what promise cryptocurrency or blockchain, what it offers to Catholics or Catholic institutions.
Let's say you were married in the church. When you were married, you needed to show certain records, like your baptismal records and the other sacraments as well. Well, a lot of those are not kept anywhere other than paper. That's a problem. And so blockchain, for example, can be used to really create immutable records for the church. But Tracy, really, there are a dozen ideas that have come our way and have been spoken of at the conference already. And we think that we're going to come away with dozens and dozens. And we're just going to, as a conference, we're just going to give them to the church.
Yeah, great advice. And great to be with you, Matthew. Thank you so much. We appreciate it, and God bless you. And finally tonight, Bishop Robert Barron reconsecrates a cemetery that was vandalized in his diocese on Halloween.
Merciful Lord, who willed that the potter's field priced with your blood should be bought as a burial place for strangers, be pleased to remember this mystery of your goodness.
5 memorial walls were coated with graffiti, as well as 2 grave markers, a statue of Christ, and a cross at a Catholic cemetery in Rochester, Minnesota. Cleanup and repairs could cost up to $8,000. Well, we thank you for watching tonight, and remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night, and God bless.